Hi, everybody. It's Andrea, and here I am. Another day, another recording. It's been a long time. The past couple of weeks, or week and a half, whatever, have been extremely busy. A lot of writing, a lot of editing, and after a 10 or 12-hour day, I'm done. It's a great deal of work to put these together. It's a pleasure, not complaining, but a lot of work. Let me just get right into it. I know what I want to say, and what I'm going to start with is the Hennepin County Sheriff. This is a woman named D.A. Mary Moriarty, and for those wondering, Hennepin County is in Minneapolis, so you can tell that this is going to be something radical coming up. I'll go to the first slide. The first part's just for fun. This is a picture of her that shows up on her Wikipedia page. And I took one look at this and I thought, my God, she's a lesbian. Not that I should be surprised. And as they would have said in Seinfeld, not that there's anything wrong with that. But I looked at that and I thought, she is a lesbian who looks exactly like the actress Jane Lynch. And this is a photo from about a decade or more ago of Jane Lynch at the Peabody Awards. It's a photo from the Peabody Awards company showing her hanging out with Diane Sawyer, and here is a side-by-side comparison. If that's not separated at birth, I don't know what is. Jane Lynch, charming actress, also lesbian. Don't know if that's a coincidence. Anyway, I thought it was funny. But what I want to talk about is the fact that Mary Moriarty, a hard-left Democrat in Minneapolis, has announced that she is prosecuting on 2 charges, criminal charges of assault, an ICE agent. And the charge is that he illegally, mostly it seems driving along the shoulder of a road, illegally aimed a gun at 2 people. And I will simply play for you her indictment.
On February 5th, Mr. Morgan was driving illegally on the shoulder of eastbound Highway 62, or the crosstown, just past the Portland Avenue exit, appearing to attempt to bypass slower traffic. The victim who was driving briefly moved their vehicle into the shoulder to slow him down. Mr. Morgan was driving a rented SUV with no markings or other features to indicate that it was an ICE vehicle. After the victim's vehicle moved back into the legal lane, Mr. Morgan sped up to pull alongside the victim's vehicle. Mr. Morgan then visibly slowed his vehicle to match the pace of the victim's vehicle, opened his window, and pointed his duty weapon directly at both victims in the other vehicle while continuing to drive illegally on the shoulder.
So that's what she has to say on the subject. What I would add is if he really did something wrong, if Morgan really engaged in a wrongful act that was outside of the scope of his duties as an ICE agent, then he is indictable, because within the scope of his duties, he's not indictable. That's how the law works, especially the supremacy clause. The other thing I will add, 2 more things actually. The DHS and ICE have failed to issue any statements on the matter, so we don't know their take. They're talking with their lawyers. The third thing I'll add is, yes, it was an unmarked vehicle. Why was he racing along in an unmarked vehicle? Almost certainly because the activists in Minneapolis were tracking ICE agents and trying to interfere with their work at great risk to everyone's life, and I will get to that in a minute too. So the fact that he was doing his official duties in an unmarked vehicle may have been a response to the harassment that ICE agents and DHS agents were getting in Minneapolis. But that's not the real story. The real story was something that was shared in that video I showed you, but I think is more clearly stated in another video, which I'm going to play for you right now.
Hi, I'm Hennepin County Attorney Mary Moriarty. Today, our office charged Gregory Donnell Morgan, an Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE agent, with 2 counts of second-degree assault. There is now a warrant for Mr. Morgan's arrest, which allows law enforcement to arrest him anywhere in the country. On February 5th, Mr. Morgan was driving illegally on the shoulder of eastbound Highway 62, or the crosstown, just past the Portland Avenue exit, attempting to bypass slower traffic. The victim, who was driving, briefly moved their vehicle onto the shoulder to slow him down. Mr. Morgan was driving a rented SUV with no markings or other features to indicate that it was an ICE vehicle. After the victim's vehicle moved back into the legal lane, Mr. Morgan sped up to pull alongside the victim's vehicle. Mr. Morgan then visibly slowed his vehicle to match the pace of the victim's vehicle, opened his window, and pointed his duty weapon directly at both victims in the other vehicle while continuing to drive illegally on the shoulder. Both the driver and passenger of the victim's vehicle felt threatened by Mr. Morgan's actions. Mr. Morgan admitted to this conduct in a voluntary interview with the State Patrol. We have charged Mr. Morgan with 2 counts of second-degree assault, 1 count for each victim, for threatening the victims with a dangerous weapon. Second-degree assault with a gun has a presumptive sentence of 36 months in prison. Mr. Morgan's conduct was extremely dangerous. Driving while pointing a weapon out of your moving vehicle at the victims who were driving another moving vehicle could have led to yet another disastrous incident in a community that has already suffered too many. I want to thank the State Patrol for their investigative work on this case and for submitting it to our office for charging consideration. Today's charges reflect an important milestone in our efforts to seek accountability for the harms inflicted on our community during Operation Metro Surge. Our work continues on all fronts, from the killings of Ms. Good and Mr. Preddy to the shooting of Mr. Sosa Solis, to the incidents being investigated by our Transparency and Accountability Project. We will not rest until we get the answers we seek about federal agent conduct across Hennepin County, and accountability is delivered wherever appropriate. Thank you.
I'm sure you saw that. She is planning on indicting the officers involved in the Alex Preddy, Renee Good deaths, and in the shooting of the illegal alien who ran. He got shot in the leg. Not that he ran. He tried to hit them with a car, I think, or something. He tried to attack them. And as for Good and Preddy, well, we've been through that a lot in American Thinker. I might have talked about it in one of these podcasts, but the bottom line is that Renee Good tried to hit an ICE officer with a vehicle, which A, triggered self-defense, and B, was an attack on a law enforcement official. I'm sure people mourn her, but this was a woman who committed suicide by cop, intentionally or not. Same thing with Alex Preddy. He'd been violently attacking ICE officer vehicles. He got involved in a fight with ICE officers instead of standing down, and he was wearing a gun. And when you have a visible gun, which is legal, I'm not saying it's not legal, but you have certain responsibilities to those, to yourself and others. If you're wearing a visible gun and are fighting hard with law enforcement officials, bad things happen. And that is almost certainly, based on all the videos I've seen, not an indictable offense. But you can bet that that's not going to stop Mario Moriarty. And you can also bet that unless he is able to change venue, something that was denied to Derek Chauvin, all of these officers will get convicted. And there'll be state convictions, so Trump will not be able to pardon them. This is a very, very bad development. It's kind of insurrection-y. It's kind of violating the Supremacy Clause, and it's kind of pretty darn dangerous. So that's my say on that. I wanted to shift to a different subject now. The Gaza ceasefire. Did I say the Iran ceasefire? No, I said the Gaza ceasefire. I actually meant that. The Gaza ceasefire happened in October 2025. It was almost 2 years after Israel invaded Gaza. It was not just a spontaneous, hey, let's go invade a densely populated area like Gaza. It was actually a response to the October 7th attack, when Hamas soldiers, I don't like the word militants, that sounds like they're kind of amateurs. Hamas soldiers with several thousand Gaza civilian men in their wake, invaded Israel and slaughtered over 1,200 people in the most brutal Stone Age way possible. They ripped them apart. They bathed in their blood. They killed babies. They mass raped women and sexually mutilated them before and after. Horrible things. Anything you've ever read about a Stone Age tribal raid is exactly what they did. Israel said, turn over the people who did it, and that'll be it. But instead, they didn't, and Israel invaded. So, invaded Gaza. It was a completely responsive war. It was not an offensive war. It was a defensive war. At every turn, Israel was hampered by the West. Initially hampered by a foot-dragging Biden, of course. He eventually gave Israel the weapons it had already bought and stuff like that. But foot-dragging, forced Israel to feed the enemy. I mean, it was the craziest war ever. Israel put its own troops at horrible risk to protect Gaza's civilians who were living in apartments where Hamas militants had weapons stores. It was an utterly crazy war. Israel fought it with exquisite care to try to minimize civilian deaths. Nevertheless, they were accused of genocide. We know, based on Hamas numbers, which are probably a lie, that 68,000 people in Gaza may have been killed. I'm not sure that's true. But Gaza, the Hamas is also paying 50,000 widows allegedly for reparations, I believe the numbers are, which means that the ratio of civilians to soldiers killed in the war is the lowest ratio ever in the history of warfare, but none of that mattered. Anyway, in October of last year, Trump seemed to bully Israel into a ceasefire. And the reason it was a bullying was because most people who support Israel wanted Israel to erase Hamas from the map. Hamas is an utterly evil organization that's entire goal is the extermination of all Jews so that the people of Gaza and the West Bank, but mostly the people of Gaza, because they're at war with the West Bank also, their enemies, not a hot war, but a cold war, can move into the land of Israel and take over. So the dream was, if Israel's going to fight, let her just wipe it out, and Trump put a stop to it. And a lot of people were very upset. I got emails from people who had Trump betrayed Israel, and there were articles about Trump's betrayal and how this was never going to be a lasting ceasefire and yada yada. Why did they do it? Some people said Trump was chasing a Nobel Prize. He just wanted a notch in his belt. Others were saying that Trump sold out. Some were saying that even though the midterms were over a year away, Trump was worried about the midterms. Others were saying that Bibi, contrary to the anti-Semites who say Bibi controls Israel, others were saying, America and Trump, others were saying that Trump utterly controls Bibi and Israel has no say in its own national security. It was strange. And then February 28th happened, and Trump and Bibi joined together and fought a war unlike any other war, although in some ways you could say that Israel's war against Gaza preceded it because it was again fought with exquisite care to take out combatants and military sites and to leave civilians as unharmed as possible. But anybody must admit it's been an extraordinary war. It started off with checkmate. It started off with decapitating the king. The Ayatollah was gone. The leadership was gone. The political leadership was gone. The military leadership is gone. Military bases is gone. Weapons manufacturing is gone. The Air Force is gone. The Navy is gone. IRGC and besieged troops are being picked off one by one. It is a surgical strike like no other. Iran is fussing now. Trump said they agreed to get rid of their uranium and agreed to open the strait, and now others are saying, no, we never agreed to that. So the problem, of course, when you totally decapitate the leadership is that nobody speaks for Iran. You have some political people left over, including a probably dead son of the Ayatollah. You have the IRGC, which is always going to be less willing to surrender, and it's completely fragmented. So who's left to carry the white flag? Who's left to surrender? Who's left to open the gates, open the Strait of Hormuz? give access to uranium. At some point, the whole thing's going to collapse completely. As long as Trump controls the Strait of Iran and keeps any shipping from going in and out of Iran, Iran's economy collapses completely. But it's a very clever way of collapsing it because he's not destroying the oil-producing infrastructure. Now, if you don't use wells, they stop working, and it's a heck of a job to get them to start pumping oil again. However, getting them to pump oil again is probably easier than dealing with completely destroyed infrastructure. And remember the burning oil fields of Kuwait? Trump has avoided all that. So now it's a waiting game. We'll see what happens. But here's my point. This war almost certainly could not have happened if Israel were preoccupied with Gaza. So my feeling is that Trump said to Bibi, look, you guys are weary, your troops are exhausted, your citizens are exhausted. Worldwide support, which was it was against you even when the war started, has become venomous and extremely anti-Semitic. Let's just kill the snake at the head. Iran is supporting Hamas, the Houthis, and Hezbollah. It's using its oil money to support all of them. Let's kill the head of the snake, and then everything else goes away. They may fight along for a while, but they can't last. And in fact, what's happening now is that there was a newscaster on Lebanese TV with the Lebanese and Israeli flags behind her. What's happening is that Lebanon, which used to be a westernized Christian country and is now a hellhole thanks to the PLO and Hezbollah, the official government is siding with Israel finally to get rid of Hezbollah from southern Lebanon, where it sits like a malevolent toad atop Israel. I was actually in northern Israel a long time ago. It would have been before the 82 invasion. And I still remember that a couple of days after I left there, a bomb struck a school in the kibbutz where I'd been visiting. So it was very real. That was from the Golan Heights, before Israel took over the Golan Heights. What I also remember is going to Paris after that and having the entire city of Paris already then in 82 covered with anti-Semitic graffiti. Not the entire city, but the subways and walls, wherever you look, there was anti-Semitic graffiti. And I remember an Israeli soldier saying something very profound. He said, yes, we are causing damage to the infrastructure, and sadly civilians are being lost. But that was when PLO was there, not Hezbollah. He said the PLO is a cancer. And when you excise a cancer, you will inevitably damage living flesh. But you must excise the cancer if the patient is to survive. And Israel cleared out the PLO, and Lebanon had something of a renaissance only for Hezbollah, funded by Iran to move in. So now Trump said to Israel, I bet, let's get rid of Iran, and the Abraham Accords will go forward. The Gulf states will inevitably, or almost certainly, side with you, as they have done, because they hate Iran and fear Iran, and we will destroy Iran if we do this right. I've got plans. I've got plans for every contingency. And then for the first time, probably ever since Israel's founding as a new nation on the land, the Holy Land of Israel, that's been the Jewish land for 4,000 years, for the first time, there will be peace. So that's my theory. I'm sticking to it. I think it was 4D chess. I think the Gaza ceasefire, which seems so bad, was simply to clear the board so that Trump had and Bibi had an open pathway to wipe out the mullahs and the IRGC. Last thing is, let's see. If you're looking at, I did a little picture of the map of Britain and the map of California, both of them with spouting oil wells behind them, and each of them holding a sign that says, need oil. And what triggered that was an article at Just the News that was headlined, California running out of fuel as imports dry up. Trump needs to act to prevent crisis, say experts. Well, I don't know about Trump having to act. Anyway, Dr. Michael, this is what the text says, Dr. Michael Misha, professor of management at the University of Southern California, and Dr. James Rector, professor of engineering at the University of California, Berkeley, explain in a paper published Wednesday that California's combined gasoline and crude inventories stood at 9 to 10 days supply, which is as much as 20% below historical norms. The professors who wrote the paper with graduate assistant Joseph Silvey adjusted the inventory estimates for the effects of reduced imports. As a result of the ongoing conflict in Iran, they estimate that California inventories are as much as 30% below normal. Well, this comes on the heels of a report that Europe is running out of jet fuel because of problems in the Strait. I want to make a couple of comments about the UK and California. California used to be a net oil exporter. That was through the 80s, although it was tailing off by the end of the 80s. It also used to have a lot of oil refineries. According to ChatGPT, California was once a major oil powerhouse. In 1914, it produced roughly 38% of U.S. oil. It remained one of America's largest producers for decades through the early to mid 20th century and was still a net oil exporter in the 80s. Meanwhile, the same in the UK. The UK became a major oil producer in the late 1970s and 1980s. That was because of North Sea oil. It was a net exporter roughly the 1980s through the early to mid 2000s. So we're talking before 1910, varied by cruise versus refined products in year. Peak output was around 1999 to 2000. So in California, they're having a disastrous oil deficit because they can't get imports. And in Britain, listen to these numbers going back to the UK. In 1999, the UK was producing 2.9 million barrels of oil per day, 2.9 million. Today, it's producing 0.6 to 0.8 barrels per day, a 75% decline. When I asked about Britain, ChatGPT said, well, it's geological, the old oil fields played out. Well, a little probing revealed that it is having exactly the same issues as California, which is the government is getting involved. In California, in pursuit of climate change, they just stopped drilling, both offshore and onshore. And they also put on all sorts of onerous regulations. You have to have exquisitely, specially formulated fuel in California, and that drove out the refineries. It just wasn't worth it for them. So now California has to import very special, extremely expensive fuel to serve its needs, and it is running out. Meanwhile, according to ChatGPT, if one puts aside the fact that the older oil fields have played out, there's another reason, and you can tell how important they are when you compare what happens in Norway, which is still an oil exporter. In the UK, they restricted exploration. They put a much higher burden of licensing and all sorts of requirements and bonding, exploration and things for anyone wanting to invest in exploration. There's permitting and legal uncertainty. You can spend years waiting for a permit. You can't, if you're trying to drill for oil, if you're wildcatting, you can't just wait. Then the ESG pressures from corporate investors and stuff, so there was no money. They just killed it. They had a net oil exporting business and they killed it. And one of the things that occurred to me as I thought about all this, I was thinking about California and the UK, and I was also thinking about Biden draining our strategic petroleum reserve to keep the prices up for his elections, is that leftists are so completely preoccupied with apocalyptic futures that they never think about real and more likely risks. So they've got it in their head that the world is going to be completely boiling and destroyed and horrible things because of oil. Not that there's any solid evidence to support this, and all their predictions have fallen apart one by one. And meanwhile, they've ignored completely the fact that if you are dependent on imported oil, if something goes wrong with your suppliers, you are up a creek without a paddle. It's the same reason I always have common things available to me. I have multiples of things I like. I mean, one of the things I do, because I'm hard to fit, I'm very petite, is if I find clothing I like, if I find shoes that fit well or a shirt that's pretty, I buy multiples because the manufacturer might stop. I'm not going something apocalyptic that I may never have clothes again and I've got to collect furs and I've got to restructure the whole clothing industry to work around me because I'm petite. I just think, I'd better buy more than one of this. Leftists don't think that way. They will restructure the entire clothing industry, change shipping routes, mandate all sorts of things, and not look at the small fixes that can protect them. And on that note, I'm done. I needed to keep this short because I've still got a lot of work to do, including putting out our weekly newsletter for subscribers. If you're not a subscriber, you might want to think about it. I know we have a lot of irritating advertisements. We need them. The boycotts of conservative sites that began in 2016, both against advertisers and through advertising placement agencies, gutted us. The fact that Google, which runs something like 94% of all internet ads, no matter which broker you're dealing with, it changed its fee structure, gutted us. And so we've had to make do with quantity because we don't have quality and we don't have deep pockets. If you become a subscriber, not only will you help support us in the face of this troublesome ad revenue, but you will also get an ad-free experience. With our new format, you will get the ability to get rid of the pictures on the home page if they bug you. If you're a subscriber, look in the upper right-hand corner and you'll see a box that says compact, and that might be a great thing for you. You'll get the opportunity to comment at the site if that's something you like, and you will get our weekly e-newsletter, which has unique content solely from the editors. It's not stuff you'll see at the site, although very occasionally as a teaser or when an article is so exceptional I think it needs to be shared, I will include those at the site itself. But you get a lot of bang for your buck, and you really help us. If you like us, please consider subscribing. We'll also be adding a video corner with videos not just from me, but from other conservative contributors. So for those who like to watch videos or listen to podcasts, that'll be something new. So we are changing the site and trying to keep it really great for you guys. Anyway, thank you so much, as always, for listening. I am endlessly grateful. Take care, and I'll be back when I'm back.